You think you're getting worse. You snapped at someone you love last week over nothing. The work you used to do without thinking now takes everything you have. And some evenings, you sit in the car in the driveway, engine off, not ready to walk inside, and you couldn't say why. You can feel people noticing. So somewhere in the last few months, you quietly reached a verdict. Something is wrong with me. I'm slipping. Whatever held me together all these years is coming loose. But what if you're reading it backwards? There's a pattern that shows up in human lives, one that Carl Jung spent decades watching in his patients, and one that modern science has started to measure. The worst stretch, the one where nothing works and you don't recognize yourself, tends to sit directly in front of the deepest change a person can go through. Not behind it, in front of it. Almost no one knows this, so people panic at exactly the moment they most need to hold steady. They run back to an old life that has already ended. Or they burn everything down just to make the feeling stop. Both moves cost years. This video is about the third option, what the shaking actually is, why it arrives right before a life reorganizes, and what to do while you're standing in it. Because if this is where you are, you're not falling behind. You're standing at a door. Insight 1. Worse is not backwards. Start with the assumption you've been carrying. You feel unstable, therefore you must be declining. It sounds like simple logic. It isn't. It's a reading error. Here's what the science actually shows. In 2014, a team of researchers published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, one of the most rigorous journals in the world. They were studying how moods shift, using a concept borrowed from physics and ecology called critical slowing down. When any complex system gets close to a tipping point, a lake about to clear, a climate about to shift, it starts to wobble. Fluctuations get bigger. The system takes longer to settle after every push. And here's the part that matters for you. They found the same signature in human beings. Rising instability of mood showed up before major shifts. But not just before people slid into depression. The same warning signs appeared before people came out of it, before recovery. Sit with that. The turbulence doesn't tell you which way you're going. It tells you that you're close to going somewhere. The wobble is not the verdict. The wobble is the threshold. Jung had reached a similar conclusion decades earlier, without the mathematics. He treated the psyche as a self-regulating system, something that constantly works to balance itself, the way a body runs a fever to fight an infection. To him, inner disturbance was rarely random noise. It was communication. Something in the depths pushing for a change the surface had been refusing to make. Which means the question you've been asking is the wrong question. You've been asking, why am I breaking? The better question is, what is trying to shift? Think about when this started for you. Not the feelings themselves, but the timing. For most people, this kind of shaking begins after a long stretch of sameness. Years of holding a shape. The job that was fine. The routine that worked. The self that everyone recognized and approved of. Nothing was wrong, and that was the problem. Somewhere underneath, the life you were built for next had started pressing against the life you already had. That pressure has to surface somehow. It surfaces as restlessness that has no obvious cause, as irritation at things you tolerated for years, as a strange grief that shows up in the middle of an ordinary day. None of it looks like progress. All of it can be the front edge of progress. So before anything else, take the label off. You are not a machine that's malfunctioning. You may be a system approaching a shift. And a system approaching a shift always shakes first. Insight 2. The retreat that isn't defeat. Now let's talk about the tiredness, because for most people standing at this door, the scariest symptom isn't the mood swings, it's the flatness. The drive is gone. The ambition that used to run your whole week has gone quiet. And you look at that and think, I'm losing my edge. Jung had a specific name for this. In his essay on psychic energy, he described a movement he called regression. Here's the idea, stripped of jargon. Your energy is usually pointed outward, at tasks, goals, people, performance. But when the outer form of your life stops fitting who you're becoming, that energy doesn't keep pouring into the old channels. It withdraws. It sinks inward, down to the deeper layers of you. From the outside, this looks like failure. You can't push like you used to. Things that used to be automatic feel heavy. From the inside, it feels like something is dying. But Jung's point was this: regression is not necessarily decline. Very often, it's preparation. The energy hasn't vanished. It has gone underground to do work you can't see, loosening old structures, gathering around something new that isn't ready to surface yet. He compared the psyche's movements to the natural world, and the natural world runs on this rhythm everywhere you look. A tree in November looks dead. It's not dead. It has pulled its life down into the roots, because that's what building a new season requires. A river that disappears underground hasn't stopped flowing. It's crossing terrain it cannot cross on the surface. Your loss of drive may be exactly this. The energy is leaving what is finished, that's all. It is not leaving you. And notice what this explains. It explains why forcing doesn't work right now. Why the discipline tricks that used to work bounce off. You've been trying to pump energy back into channels the deeper part of you has already closed. The exhaustion isn't weakness. It's the cost of fighting your own current. There's a practical test hidden in this. Look at what specifically went flat. It's almost never everything. The old goals went flat. The performance went flat. But somewhere at the edges, something small still pulls at you. A subject you keep circling. A skill you keep wanting to touch. An old love you shelved a decade ago. That little pull matters because energy that goes underground doesn't stay there. It resurfaces where the new life is. Follow the faint interest, not the dead obligation. If what you're hearing right now is landing, take 1 second and press the like button.
It costs you nothing, and it tells this platform to put this in front of someone else who's sitting in a driveway thinking they're broken. Insight 3. The pendulum you can't feel. There's an old idea Jung dug out of Heraclitus, a Greek philosopher from 25 centuries ago, and made central to his psychology. He called it an antiodromia, a running toward the opposite. Here's what it means. When a life becomes extremely one-sided, when one attitude, one identity, one way of operating is held too long and too tightly, the opposite doesn't disappear. It builds up in the unconscious like water behind a dam. And the further the visible life swings in one direction, the more force gathers on the other side. Sooner or later, the reversal comes, not as a gentle correction, as a break in the weather. The person who was endlessly agreeable snaps and can't stop feeling rage.
The achiever who ran on ambition for 20 years wakes up unable to care at all. The one who kept everyone else alive suddenly can't answer a single message. It looks like character collapse. Jung saw it as the psyche's crude way of restoring balance, after years of one-sidedness that gentler signals couldn't correct. Now put this next to what you learned in the first insight, because together they change how the darkest moment reads. In a pendulum swing, where is the arc at its most extreme? At the exact point where the reverse movement begins. The far edge of the swing and the beginning of the return are not two moments. They are the same moment, which means the stretch of your life that feels like the absolute bottom, the point where the old way of being has finally exhausted itself completely, is very often the point where the counter movement has already started. Underneath, out of sight. You don't feel the return yet, you only feel the extreme. But the fact that the old way has stopped working this completely is itself the evidence that something else has begun. Let's be careful here, because this is where this kind of idea usually gets turned into magic, and we don't do that on this channel. This is not a promise that pain automatically converts into growth, or that the universe schedules your breakthrough. It's a description of how one-sided systems behave. If nothing was building on the other side, the old life wouldn't be failing this loudly. Collapse of the old attitude and rise of the new one are one process seen from two sides. So when you say, "Nothing works anymore," hear what you're actually reporting. The old configuration has reached the end of its arc. That is not the news of your ending. That is the sound of the swing coming back. Insight 4. The death that isn't dying. Somewhere in this stretch, most people say a sentence that scares them more than any mood. They say, "I don't know who I am anymore." If that sentence has been living in you, listen closely, because this may be the most important reframe in this video. That sentence is not a symptom of breakdown. It is the signature of a specific phase, and human beings have known about this phase for most of history. A little over a century ago, an anthropologist named Arnold van Gennep studied ceremonies across dozens of cultures and noticed that every major life transition was structured the same way: 3 stages. First, separation. The old identity is deliberately ended. Then a middle stage he called the threshold, where the person is neither what they were nor what they're becoming. And finally, return. The new identity is recognized, and the person rejoins the community as someone else. Another anthropologist, Victor Turner, spent his career on that middle stage. He called the people standing in it betwixt and between. No longer the old thing, not yet the new thing. And here's what matters. Traditional cultures treated that in-between state as so disorienting, so dangerous to the person inside it, that they never let anyone go through it alone. They built ceremony around it. Elders held it. The community named it. Everyone understood that the confusion was not a malfunction. The confusion was the passage itself. We dismantled the ceremonies. We kept the passage. So now, when a modern person hits the threshold, when the old self dies on schedule and the new one hasn't formed, there's no elder, no name, no map. Just a person alone at 2 in the morning, concluding that they're losing their mind. You're not losing your mind. You're between identities. The self you built for the last chapter of your life was real, and it worked, and it's finished. What's dissolving is not you. It's a costume you wore so long you forgot it had a zipper. Jung's entire psychology points at the same distinction. There is the personality you constructed to survive and be approved of, and there is something deeper in you that was always more than that construction. The construction is what dies at the threshold. The deeper thing is what the death makes room for. That was his real argument about the shape of a life. The first half builds a self that fits the world. The second half finds the self that the fitting buried. And the doorway between them almost never feels like a doorway. It feels like losing yourself. If this channel is walking with you through that territory, subscribe. Everything here is built for the person crossing exactly this kind of threshold, and the next videos will meet you where this one leaves off. Insight 5. The Night Sea Journey. Long before psychology existed, people encoded this passage in stories, and one story pattern shows up on nearly every continent.
An ethnographer named Leo Frobenius collected hundreds of versions of it and gave it a name: the Night Sea Journey. Jung took it up as one of his central maps of transformation. The pattern goes like this. The hero is on the water when the sun goes down. Something enormous rises from the deep and swallows him whole, ship and all. He doesn't escape it. He can't. He is carried inside the creature, through the dark, under the sea, while everyone who watched from shore assumes he is gone. And then, at dawn, on some far shore, the creature opens and the hero steps out, changed, carrying something he could not have found any other way. Ancient people were not confused about what they were describing. They weren't talking about fish. They were talking about the passages in a human life where you go down and under, where the light disappears, where from the outside it looks like you've been destroyed, and where the movement is still forward the entire time.
Notice the detail the stories all agree on, because it's the one modern people refuse. The hero does not fight his way out of the belly in the first scene. The being carried is the journey. The time in the dark is not the interruption of the story, it is the story. Now measure that against how you've been treating your own dark stretch, as an emergency, as a delay, as something to escape as fast as possible so the real story can resume. Every self-help reflex you have says get out, feel better, get back to normal. And that reflex, more than the darkness itself, is what keeps people stuck. Because energy spent fighting the passage is energy not spent making it. Here's the reframe this old map hands you. Your task this season is not to feel good. Your task is passage. Those are different jobs with different definitions of success. On the surface, a good month is a month you enjoyed. In the deep, a good month is a month you came through with your eyes open. A month you didn't waste banging on the walls demanding the old sunlight back. The dark is not off the path. Right now, the dark is the path. Insight 6. 4 years in the dark. If all of this sounds like theory, you should know that Jung didn't learn it from books. He learned it because it happened to him. And when it happened, he could not tell that it was a threshold. It looked like the end. In 1913, Jung was 38 years old and had everything a man in his field could want. He was Freud's most trusted colleague, president of the International Psychoanalytical Association, a rising star with a university career. Then his break with Freud arrived, and within about a year, he had lost nearly all of it. The friendship ended. He resigned his presidency. He gave up his university lectureship. The professional world that had defined him largely closed its doors, and then came the inner collapse. By his own account, he entered a period of profound disorientation. Visions and images rose in him with a force he could not control. At points, he seriously wondered whether he was losing his sanity. This lasted, in its most intense form, for roughly 4 years. There was no evidence from inside those years that anything good was happening. His published output slowed. His old life was gone. A man in his position, watching himself, had every reason to conclude that his story had peaked and was now dissolving. What did he actually do? 2 things, and both matter for you. First, he held his ordinary life. He kept seeing patients. He stayed with his family. He famously gave himself small grounding practices, as simple as playing with stones by the lake, building things with his hands. He did not run, and he did not burn his life down. He let the storm be a storm while the daily structure held. Second, instead of anesthetizing what was rising in him, he turned toward it. Night after night, he wrote down the images, dialogued with them, took them seriously as messages rather than malfunctions. Those private notebooks became the raw material for what was eventually published, decades after his death, as the Red Book. Out of those 4 dark years came nearly everything we now know him for. The concepts this channel draws on, the framework that has reached millions of people, the entire second act of his life. None of it existed before the collapse. All of it was born inside it. An old man near the end of his life, he looked back and wrote this. The years when I was pursuing my inner images were the most important in my life. In them, everything essential was decided. Read that again. Not the years of his triumphs, not the years when everything worked. The years that felt like drowning were, by his own final accounting, the most important years he had. Yours may be too. And just like him, you would have no way of knowing it from inside. Insight 7. Don't rebuild the old wall. So what do you actually do standing at the door? Here's the practical shape of it, and it starts with the 2 mistakes that cost people years. The first mistake is running back. When the old identity starts dissolving, the urge to restore it becomes enormous, and it's strongest right before the dissolving completes. People recommit to the job they've outgrown, restart the relationship that ended for good reasons, double down on the persona that was suffocating them, because familiar suffocation feels safer than open air. Understand what running back really is. It's an attempt to climb back into a shell you've already outgrown. Even if you succeed, you now live in a shell that doesn't fit, and the whole process must eventually start again, from a more tired starting point. The second mistake is burning it down. The opposite panic. Quit everything this week. End every relationship. Move across the world. Make the outside as dramatic as the inside feels. Sometimes big outer changes do come out of this passage, but decisions made at the loudest moment are almost never the deep ones. They're anesthesia dressed up as courage, an attempt to make the inner shaking stop by drowning it in outer noise. The rule is simple. In the storm, steer small. Make the permanent decisions after the water settles. Between those two mistakes runs the narrow path, and Jung gave it a precise description. He called it the transcendent function, and stripped of jargon, it means this. When the old thing is gone and the new thing hasn't arrived, your job is to hold both truths without forcing a fake resolution in either direction. Not pretending the old life still works. Not grabbing the first new identity off the shelf. Standing in the tension, awake, until something genuinely new forms. Jung's claim, tested first on himself, was that the psyche will produce a third option, a way forward you could not have planned, but only if you can bear the in-between long enough for it to appear. Force a resolution early, and you get a repainted version of the old life. Hold the tension, and you get something you couldn't have imagined. While you hold, 3 practices carry the weight. Keep one small discipline alive. Not your whole old routine, just one thread of order. A walk at the same hour. A made bed. A page written. When the inner world is reorganizing, one reliable outer structure keeps you from dissolving along with the old identity.
This is exactly what Jung's patients and stones by the lake were.
Give the process a place to speak. Jung wrote his images down. You can do a plain version of the same thing. 10 minutes, pen, one question. What is ending, and what keeps pulling at me? You're not writing literature. You're giving the underground a surface to arrive on. And follow the faint pull. Remember insight 2. The energy that left your old goals is resurfacing somewhere quiet. The strange new interest, the thing you keep noticing. Give it small, regular attention, without demanding it justify itself as a career or a plan. New lives don't announce themselves. They start as a pull. Let's put the whole picture in one place. The shaking is not proof of decline. Systems wobble hardest just before they shift. The flatness is not death. It's energy moving underground to build what's next.
The darkest point sits at the far edge of the swing, where the return has already begun. The confusion about who you are is not madness. It's the threshold every culture before ours knew by name. The way through the dark is through it. The man who mapped all this lived 4 years inside it and called them the most important years of his life. So here's where this leaves you. Whatever is falling quiet in your life right now, you don't have to save it. Whatever is pressing up from underneath, you don't have to name it tonight. You only have to do the one thing the panicking person can't do. Stay at the door. Don't run back into the room you've outgrown. Don't tear the house down to feel something. Stand there, keep your one thread of order, and let the thing that is trying to happen finish happening.
You are not getting worse. You are getting ready. So hold. The door is already opening. If you're standing at that door right now, leave one word in the comments. Threshold. That's how the next person scrolling past learns they're not the only one standing there.